I'm Sonia DeBoer, and I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I've kind of put my name here, and the title of my training kind of series is going to be Families Living with Children with Autism, Quick Tips. And this is the introduction video. So this video is just to help kind of set up for all the other videos. And I'm going to kind of give you some background information and then talk about 3 different concepts of strategies that you're going to need to be able to use in all the videos that I show you. So I work with children with autism, primarily ages 0 to 10, and I've done work in the home of children with autism for my entire career, which has been about 26 years, almost 26 years in June. And that's where my passion and my heart really lie, is helping families, and worked with grandparents and parents and siblings and aunts and uncles, and I just love really helping families gain the skills that they need to be their own resource for themselves and for their children, and to help them have the tools they need so that when they're at home they can be managing things and not feel so stressed out, and also be able to go out in the community with their child. And I know that is really hard, and I've done a lot of that work with parents and grandparents and stuff. So I really, if you're watching this really soon after I've made this video, we're in the kind of stay-at-home time period, quarantine type of thing because of the COVID virus, and that's kind of how I got this idea, thinking that a lot of parents and grandparents and siblings might be home with their child with autism 24/7 right now, because you wouldn't necessarily be going to work, the child wouldn't necessarily be going to school, or maybe you're always at home with your child if they're younger than 5 and they don't go to a preschooler yet, or whatnot, but you might be just in looking for strategies of things that you can help. I'm going to be talking about all kinds of things like how to help with dressing your child, getting your child to be more independent with dressing and eating and dealing with food aversions, maybe bath time, having instructional control with your child, kind of just different things that you might deal with. They're all going to be about 15 to 20 minute videos. That's why they're called quick tips. And this is the introduction video that I'm going to have it so that everybody that wants to watch the quick tips has to first watch this. Otherwise, quick tips won't be as valuable to you, and you won't necessarily understand or have the strategies that you need. Okay, so a lot of the actual ABA strategies that I'm going to be, ABA stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. It's a research and evidence-based practice for working with children with autism. And I've written a book, it's called Discrete Child Training, and it's part of the series on autism spectrum disorders with the publisher ProEd. And you can go to ProEd, their website. This is the introduction. The reason I'm saying that is that I'm not going to talk at all about discrete child training in this video or any of the videos, but 3/4 of this book is all about providing the structure that children with autism need in order to learn new skills, learn new appropriate behaviors, how to decrease inappropriate behaviors, and just all of those different types of things. And it's all strategies like prompting and fading, shaping, what does it mean to have instructional control, token economy systems, task analysis, reinforcement, all those different things. So some of them I'm going to talk about in this introduction video because you need them in order to deal with all the other things that I'm going to talk about. And then some of them I will introduce in upcoming videos. So let's get started. I have 3 topics that I'm going to introduce today. They're reinforcement and behavior momentum and shaping. And I actually have notes to keep myself short enough. I do a lot of training and I can talk forever on these topics. And so I actually have notes just to keep myself short and sweet and to the point, because I want you guys not to have to take a long time to sit down to watch these videos, and you can rewatch them. And that's why, kind of like I was saying before, if you want more detailed information, you can get this book about the specific strategies. So reinforcement is the first strategy that I want to talk about, and it's kind of the overarching number one needed strategy for teaching children with autism, teaching anybody anything. There has to be motivation for somebody to learn. And motivation in a typical child and a typical, or what we call neurotypical person, is often intrinsic. Like, we just have this as a human an innate desire to learn new things and to explore our environment and to experiment and try things out and go through that process of problem solving and learning. But unfortunately, a lot of children with autism, to some degree, lack that ability to learn from their environment or to intrinsically want to learn. They often want to engage in their own kind of what we call self-stimulation, self-stimming activities, and not necessarily learn new skills that will help them function in their environment. So one of the things that we can do to help children with autism learn new skills and learn new behaviors is we provide, at the beginning of their learning process, external reinforcement, external motivation. We call that extrinsic motivation rather than the internal motivation that we would see in a typical person. But what it typically leads to with, if you do that, is that the child with autism does become more and more intrinsically motivated because their brain starts to develop. And not only does it develop those new skills when you're doing the work with them, but they're developing all over their brain, and they're learning what it means to have those skills. They're learning how to learn. Their brain is actually learning how to learn. So it exponentially grows when you use reinforcement. It teaches the brain all kinds of things. So what I want to talk about with reinforcement is that you are using this as your teaching tool. And it is the way that you tell a child, yes, that's exactly right, and that's what I want you to do again in the future. So reinforcement is something that you do, and because of somebody's behavior, you do something where you give them something that they want, and it increases the chances in the future that they'll do that behavior again because they got reinforced and they liked that. So that's why you use reinforcement. It's your teaching tool. Yes, exactly. Do that again. So that's how I want you to think of it. A lot of people get caught up in reinforcement and saying, well, I shouldn't have to give him rewards, or I shouldn't have to do this so that he'll, he should already know that he needs to do this behavior. The thing about the brain of a child with autism is that they don't actually already know that. And a child that is 6 who has autism could be developmentally at like around the age of 2. So you don't know where their brain is with that observational learning process. So we have to teach them. In order to teach them new skills, we need to use reinforcement. And then we always fade away reinforcement. We always slowly get rid of it because they don't continue to need it, and we don't want them to continue to need it. So to begin with, there is 2 different types of reinforcers. There's primary reinforcers and there is secondary reinforcers. And primary reinforcers are primary because they're biological and something that all humans want. We all want food and drink and those kinds of things. And so those are things that we will all usually automatically accept in the beginning. And so a lot of really young kids, no matter whether they have autism or what disability, they would love to get a gummy bear or a drink of milk or something that they think is fun, and that's a primary tangible. Other reinforcers that we call secondary reinforcers are like praise and tokens that mean something, a toy that you might get that doesn't necessarily in the beginning have any value. So the thing that secondary reinforcers means is that people have actually learned the value of why that reinforcer means something. Praise is a secondary reinforcer because we actually learn the value of that attention that we get from somebody and that we like that. High five, a hug, or just, you did such a good job, things like that. Attention from people. It's actually something that some children with autism don't want. And so they actually need to learn that is a good thing and that they want to go to you for positive things. And tokens are something that we all grow up learning, that when you earn a token or you earn something, it has value because you can exchange it for something else that you really want, which was kind of the ultimate of money, right? In the beginning, a 5-year-old doesn't care about a green piece of paper that has a 10 on it, to an adult like you or me. $10 is great. We understand the value of that, but we have to learn that value. So money is a secondary reinforcer. Okay, so one of the things, I say that a lot, just so you know, kind of funny, like I say one of the things, or the most important thing, and it's just kind of because so many things I think are so important. So what I want people to understand is that you can reinforce any behavior. So you can reinforce a child tantruming, you can reinforce a child spitting, you can reinforce a child throwing something, you can reinforce a child asking appropriately for something, or reinforce a child that has given you the correct answer. Anything can be reinforced. So you want to be sure that you understand if you are actually reinforcing something. So I have kind of 4 examples that will help to try to help you understand that. So a child, it says, "Cookie, please." Can I have the cookie, please? The adult may be standing there holding the cookie, and the child is hitting the adult and saying, "I want the cookie, give me the cookie." And the adult gives the child the cookie and just says, okay, stop, here's the cookie. Now that adult just actually reinforced the child hitting and yelling and saying they wanted the cookie, because that means that the child learns, oh, if I just hit people, I get what I want. Okay? Then you can also not reinforce appropriate behavior. So you might be holding the cookie and the adult says, and the child says, "Can I have the cookie, please?" And the adult just doesn't give it to them and says, "No, you can't have it." Now that is not reinforcing. It may be appropriate to say, "No, you can't have it," but you're not reinforcing what the child asked for. If you ignored completely, then that would be totally no reinforcement. If you say, "No, you can't have it, it's almost time for dinner," and then you put it to the side and you set a timer and you say, "Okay, in half an hour you can have the cookie after you eat dinner," then you still acknowledge that the child was asking for it and they got attention for being appropriate. But I just wanted you to understand the difference between reinforcing appropriate behavior, not reinforcing appropriate behavior or inappropriate behavior, and kind of that whole kind of concept of that you can actually reinforce inappropriate behavior, but you can also sometimes not reinforce appropriate behavior. Okay? So then the other thing I wanted to let you know about is there's 2 types of reinforcement that we use that are called continuous reinforcement and intermittent reinforcement. And so the reason I want you to understand about this is because if you've ever had, how people talk about satiation, meaning you've gotten too much of something, so you are basically full and you just don't want it anymore. So that can happen a lot when we're eating a meal that we love, and we eat so much that then we're just like, I don't care how much I love, that blueberry pie, I just can't eat anymore. So you're satiated, you're full, and you don't want any more. So one of the things that we talk about with reinforcement is when a child first is learning something new, they're learning a new behavior or learning a new skill, we reinforce them every single time, because what that does is it tells them, they get that repetition for a while of hearing, yes, that's correct, do it again, good job. And they're excited and they're getting that reinforcement frequently. And then what happens is we move to more intermittent and we reinforce them less because now that skill is what we call mastered. They can do it anytime, anywhere. So they don't need to be reinforced anymore because they can just do it. And now we're going to require more of them to get that reinforcement. And so something that they've mastered, we may now just intermittently sometimes reinforce it. So sometimes you do it and you get reinforced, sometimes you do it and you don't get reinforced. And that actually makes the behavior stronger. So if you think of gambling, that's like the number one behavior that is the example of very strong behavior with intermittent reinforcement, because the payoff of $1 million is so great that a person could gamble for 2 years just hoping to get that $1 million. And so because the payoff, and then they get it once in 2 years, and then they'll go another 2 years or whatever. So that intermittent reinforcement, because you don't get it every time, you never know when you're going to get it, so you try harder. And that's what happens with intermittent reinforcement, is you try harder because you never know when you're going to get it. So you'll continue to do that behavior. So think of that when you're working with a child and you fade continuous reinforcement from a new thing off, and you just reinforce it every once in a while to make sure that the child knows that they're still doing a great job, they still feel successful, but they can do that. And now you've moved on to new things that you're doing continuous reinforcement, and these things every once in a while you still reinforce. Okay, so there's 4 crucial factors that I wanted to talk about when you get into reinforcement, and it's about it being effective. Okay, so when you reinforce a child, it needs to be immediately after the behavior. So when the child does something, you reinforce it right away. You don't say, okay, honey, you earned a gummy bear, and then you go to the kitchen and get the gummy bear, and then you come back, and in the meantime, the child did other things. You don't even know what they necessarily did. But that the concept that we learned of immediate reinforcement in research is that the brain actually ties, when you get reinforced with something that you like, it ties it to the behavior that was right before that reinforcer was given. And so even if we're saying you did a good job reading, if they went to the bathroom in between, or if they threw something across the room in between, they could have done appropriate or inappropriate things in between doing the behavior that you're trying to teach and getting that reinforcer, and it will end up being tied to the behavior that was right before it. So you really want to be sure that you've reinforced the behavior that you're trying to teach, that you're wanting to increase, because then that makes it effective, meaning you are actually effectively reinforcing the behavior that you want to reinforce. Okay. So another thing is that you want the child to only have reinforcement, access to that reinforcer for that behavior. So behaviors that you're working on or skills that you're trying to teach, those reinforcers are kept in a special place and hidden away, and the child doesn't have access to them any other time than when you're working on those sorts of things. So if you're working on bath time and getting through that routine with appropriate behavior, you have a special reinforcer or several reinforcers that you use during that time, and they never get them. That makes that reinforcer stronger than anything, because they never get it other than when they do a good job during bath time. So that the strength of that reinforcer now will help you with bath time. Okay, does that make sense? All right, then the third is that the amount of reinforcement that you give needs to match what you're asking for. So if you're asking for something really difficult, then you would have a higher amount of reinforcement. If you're asking for something not so hard for that child, not too difficult for them to do, and it's not a new skill, then you give a little bit of reinforcement. Okay, so if they hate math and you're working on getting some math problems done, then you would reinforce more frequently during that time and with a higher level of reinforcement. So they might get a whole gummy bear every time they finish 2 problems of math or something like that, whereas they love doing puzzles and they can complete an entire puzzle and get a gummy bear. So you want more reinforcement. And maybe it's a different reinforcer again, like I said before. Maybe because math is so difficult, you're saving a special reinforcer just for math, and they get more of it when they're doing math, because you're increasing the reward for them to do something that they don't like to do. Okay? And you also, the last thing is that the child only gets a reinforcer when they've earned it. Okay? A specific reinforcer that's set aside to be used to teach a child, they only get that when they've actually demonstrated the behavior. Okay? So not just partially did it, or not because they tried, or only half of the time they did it great, but half of the time they didn't. They have to learn that they only get that reinforcer that you said they were going to get if they actually do the behavior. You don't want to give in essence, or not follow through with saying, you get this only if you do this. That really gives you the strength and the power to keep holding that out until they behave appropriately, and then they learn. That's what it means to get a reinforcer, is when they do actually what they are supposed to do. Okay, so those 4 things are really important to remember. All right, so another thing is that I just kind of wanted to give you some problem-solving skills about if something is not going well and you're not sure why, the child still is having difficulty, and you think you've got the reinforcers, you think you've got a good strength of reinforcer, they don't get it other times. There's kind of things to think about. Make sure that the child is only getting that reinforcer during that time, if you really are struggling with that behavior. So kind of check with other people, because I've had that happen before, and then I find out somebody else just lets them have, gummy bears whenever. The other thing is that, does that child actually want that reinforcer? Be sure you're always assessing, day to day, what the child wants most of the time, that time. What children want during a given moment or time can change. So don't think that just because today or this week it really worked to do gummy bears, maybe next week he wants high fives, or he wants hugs, or he wants to play, chase or something like that. So kind of reassess. And then, does the amount of reinforcement match the difficulty level? Okay? And make sure that the child isn't showing signs of kind of getting full, or what we call satiated. They haven't gotten that reinforcement too much that now it doesn't really have any power, and they don't really care about it. So then they don't care about doing the behavior, because they're like, I kind of get that thing all the time. And again, make sure that they're getting that reinforcement only immediately after that particular behavior that you want them to increase. Okay? And that you only provide the reinforcer, when the child, sorry, I lost my train of thought. That correct response is what gets the reinforcer. So they've said their colors correctly, or they've brushed their teeth without crying or throwing their toothbrush, and then they get the reinforcer. Okay, so let me make sure I've gotten through the different things that I wanted to on reinforcement. All right. So when we talk about behavior momentum, it means that we have behaviors happening in succession, and it's easy in the beginning, so it gets things going, and then you can throw in some more difficult things, or things that the child doesn't like, in there, because the child has already gotten going with being successful, and they feel more confident, and they have that kind of trust built up in that moment that you want them to do well, you're going to give them the reinforcers that they want, and so they're more likely then to do that more difficult behavior or skill, or something that they don't want to do. It could be that it's not difficult, they just don't want to do it. They're more likely to do it because they started with all these easy things, and they got going, and it was fun. So you throw those in, and then you make sure you do easy things again. So we kind of talk about this thing called easy, easy, hard, hard, easy, easy, hard, easy, hard. So, E for easy and hard. So you kind of do a whole bunch of E's in the beginning. of things, and it can be anything. So, even a kid that doesn't want to take out the trash. So what you say in the beginning is, okay, let's go find all of the trash that we can find in the garage or in the kitchen, and let's get everything in there, and every piece of trash that you throw in there, you get an M&M. Okay, so we go around and we find, oh, good job, and give them an M&M. They put it in the trash, and then you say, okay, let's go dump it in the big trash can in the garage or out in the thing, And so then you've built them up to that being fun, and you say, okay, and you'll get 5 M&Ms for doing the trash. So you've got it. You started it easy. So if we're gonna, sit down and we're gonna read a book, I might say. And the kid, it's hard for him to attend to a book and sit there. It's not that it's that difficult. It's not that he doesn't really like it. It's just hard for him to stay there. And I want to, build the amount of time that he's reading at a book. So I might just in the beginning open the book and be more interactive in the beginning so that I'm gaining his attention. Oh, what color is that? Oh, look at that. What animal is that? Right, you're so smart. Oh my gosh, let's turn the page. And he's going across the street and he's going to throw the rock into the pond, and ooh, what's the animal in there? So you get him involved and interested, and then you do longer and longer spans of time of him attending without interacting. So you are always building momentum towards what you want the child to do. And we call it throwaway instructions or throwaway demands, because those things aren't what really matter, the easy things that you're doing. It's the big thing that you're working up to that matters, and so you're building that child's success towards that. So really thinking about that. There's 3 things that you kind of use behavioral momentum for, and that's initial. So when you're just getting started on something, you haven't been like working on a work task or doing anything in particular, and you're just going to get started. So it's now, time to go sit down for dinner, or it's time to look at the book, or it's time to start the bathroom routine. That initial thing is where you want to build momentum so that you get the child into the mode of doing that and feeling successful, so that it's more likely that they're going to do the things they don't want to or that are difficult. The other is maintaining behavioral momentum. So while you're in the middle of doing something, you don't want to lose it. You don't want things to slow down and to lose your momentum. So you continue to throw in fun, easy things in there so that it keeps the speed, keeps things rolling in between the things that are difficult. And then there's another time where when you actually have lost behavioral momentum, you may need to reestablish behavioral momentum. And that's another strategy where you use behavioral, you act almost like it's initial again, and you get it going. So motivation and compliance are the things that you're looking for when you're using behavioral momentum. You're looking to motivate the child to do the things that you're asking of him, to do things that are more difficult, to do things he doesn't want to do, and you're increasing the likelihood that he's going to be compliant with doing those things because you're reinforcing, you're making him more successful, and they work towards him being able to get those things done. So it's really important that you are always providing small reinforcement for those those easy things that you do, because it's not just that you're asking them to do easy things, but they see that they get reinforcements, they get things that they want even for doing those easy things. You're establishing a bond, a trust, that I'm the giver of good things. So you're going to want to do what I'm asking you to do because you're going to get great things from me. So, in the beginning of, oh, what color is that? Yeah, give me a high five. If that's what the child wants, they want that positive attention, then you would do that. Or I might give him half a gummy bear. Whatever he wants. But it's a small amount. It's a small amount of something. And then, when they do that difficult thing, they get more reinforcement for that. Oh my word, you just did that whole thing all by yourself. You get such and such. And that was something that he wanted. That was a larger reinforcer. Okay, so always be sure that you're keeping those small tasks in there that are easy and that you reinforce them, and that the child then feels that success and wants to keep going. So I have kind of a logic path that I go through in my book that I really like to do when I do trainings about behavior momentum. So I'm going to read this to you in slow way, and I often tell people to kind of close their eyes and visualize it, because it's helps you to gain that concept of what I'm talking about with behavioral momentum. So, teaching in smaller increments makes achieving mastery more probable. So that means you're breaking things down, you're making them easier to do, because that you're teaching the child's learning small parts, small easy things to do. Okay, so let me say that again. Teaching in smaller increments makes achieving mastery more probable. Okay, so you're more likely to do it if it's small and easier to do. Now, the second thing after that is mastery of skills leads to more success with skill performance. When you master doing something, you are more successful in doing it and doing other things. Okay, so teaching in smaller increments makes achieving mastery more probable, and mastery of skills leads to more success with skill performance. Okay, then, which leads to more and higher levels of reinforcement. You do things more frequently in the small increments, you get reinforced more. You master skills and you're successful with your skill performance, means you get more reinforcement. Okay, so 1, teaching in smaller increments makes achieving mastery more probable, and mastery of skills leads to more success with skill performance, which leads to more and higher levels of reinforcement, which results in higher levels of motivation. Okay, so the more you get reinforced, the more motivated you are to perform, because you're just getting all these great things. I'm going to do more so I can get more great things. And last, which results in an increased momentum of responding correctly to instructions. Okay, so I'm going to say that whole thing one more time. There's 5 things in there. Teaching in smaller increments makes achieving mastery more probable. And mastery of skills leads to more success with skill performance, which leads to more and higher levels of reinforcement, which results in higher levels of motivation, which results in increased momentum of responding correctly to instructions. Okay, so rewind that if you need to, or you can write it down, but it really helps. It's that logic path of why we do all of what we do along the way to build momentum and help the children be successful. Okay, when we're talking about behavior momentum, and you may have heard me mention a little bit about you don't want to lose momentum. We call that spending behavioral momentum. You don't want to spend too much behavioral momentum or you lose it. It slows down and you lose it. So things that can spend it or make you lose it are beginning your time with a child with too high of a level of difficulty of a task or a request that you're making of them. Or you have too many difficult things in succession that you ask them to do without throwing in some of those easier things. Or you have too few easy tasks in the beginning. So you don't give enough to get that ball rolling and get it going far enough and fast enough so that you can throw in those more difficult things. And sometimes what people do is they forget to intersperse easy tasks all the time. The whole time you're working with that child, you are always throwing in little easy things so that they feel successful and you keep that momentum going. Another thing is that you can forget to provide reinforcement for those easy tasks. Be sure that if the child isn't motivated by praise yet, You can't always use praise. You want to tie praise to any type of tangible thing that you give the child, so that eventually praise could be the only reinforcer that a child gets. But be sure you are giving what the child wants in small increments. The other thing is that your reinforcement could just be not something that the child wants, or you're not giving enough for those difficult tasks. So you could be doing a good job of interspersing easy and hard, but you've kind of not reached that level of reinforcement to match how difficult the things are that you are asking in there. Also, you need to keep the pace going. Momentum means something keeps going. So you do need to keep the pace going. So be sure that you're not too slow in how you're doing things. So if you are a potter or and you work with different clay or even glass or something like that, you think of how that person shapes slowly towards the end goal of what they're making. So if they're making a vase, it starts out as this lump and it doesn't look anything like a vase. And you don't even know if it can turn into a vase or it's going to be a mug or something like that, because you're shaping it. You're not prompting it to do something. You don't just touch it and then it becomes, you don't touch it and say, I want you to become a vase, which is what we differentiate between prompting. You prompt somebody to do something and they do it. Shaping is making something slowly get towards the end of the goal. So what we're doing is we are reinforcing that child, learning a new skill, and we reinforce the child as they get to the end goal of doing what we want them to do. So right now, I have a very young niece, and we're teaching her to do sign language. She's not talking yet, but she has very clear intent to communicate, which is the perfect time to use sign language because kids can do physical things before they can talk. So she likes to open things. So one of the things is we're teaching her open. So this is this American sign for open. But she really does easy. For some reason, we've kind of noticed she does things a lot easier if she has her hands up like this. So right now, we're trying to get her to do this for open because it's easier. This is the end result of open. This is what you're looking for. And she hasn't learned the sign of open yet. So we're going to shape her physical signing towards doing this, okay? So at the beginning, we say, you want to get in? You want the bag open? You want the door open? You want the book? This is book open, but right now we're teaching open for everything. And so she does this. She goes like this. And because she intentionally did that, and it's an approximation, we're going to reinforce that because that's motivating then to her. It's a way to teach her, yes, you tried to do it. You're getting close. And she's never signed open before, so we can't just automatically do it. And it would take so much physical prompting that she could get actually dependent on the physical prompting. So we want her to be independent. So in the beginning, we try to make her to do it. We use her physically doing it, but then she gets this. She does this on her own. We say yes, and we open the bag and give it to her. And then the next thing we say we want to do is this. We want her to do this. Okay, so now we don't give it to her if she just does this, but we show her. We physically help her do that. We show it to her to do that, and then when she does it on her own, we go, and you're like, yes, that's open. Then we try to get her to turn her hands over. Now, we could choose this was enough. And I've done that with kids with autism. Why go on any further? We're just going to choose this. She makes noises. She is going to talk. We know that she has the ability to talk, so eventually she will. And we don't look at sign language as her end communication means. We're just getting her brain to start communicating now. So we could accept that. Or if we're going to go towards the end result, we actually try to turn her hands over. So now she knows that she needs to do this, but now we're showing her to do this. So maybe she goes to just doing this, and that's better than doing this because this is more like the hands. So that's what I mean by reinforcing. So she gets what she wants, as she gets closer to doing the end thing. And then when you get the very end goal of something that the child did independently, you just reinforce the heck out of her. You might have all kinds of things that you open up around her. I'm going to open all of them. Good job. And then the thing is with shaping is that you need to do it, frequently in order for it to become a skill that she gets practice with. You've got to practice something in order to get there. You can't just do it every once in a while. So when, like with her, we've got things in clear Tupperware containers, clear bags, anything that she could want, she's going to have to ask for open. And the back door is a big thing. She always wants to go in the backyard. So we always have the back door closed now, even if it's warm out, so that she has to ask for open. So you create more opportunities for that child when you're shaping that behavior. Okay? So it's important to make sure that your steps are small enough when you're doing shaping. You want to think about that according to the child, if they're saying something, or if they're, if you're teaching them to brush their teeth, how many steps are you going to get towards them being independent? And so in the beginning, they maybe just put the toothpaste on the toothbrush and then they're done, and then you help them do the rest of all the brushing and all that, and that sort of thing. But you then gradually make them do more and more. Washing hands is the same thing and all that. So shaping behavior is really important to understand that when a child can't do something already, you think of that piece of clay and how you're starting from nothing and you're going to something. And so you are reinforcing the approximations of them getting there to that end goal. Okay, so those are the skills that I want you to understand about, so that when I'm doing these other trainings and I say things like, you need to be sure that you're reinforcing the child, or use the highest level of reinforcement for that, or I say something like, keep up the momentum here, really throw in those easy tasks, or be sure you remember to establish momentum, or if I say, shape this behavior. This is something that you're going to want to analyze and write down your approximations. Those are all the things that you might hear me talk about in the upcoming trainings. Okay? So I'm looking forward to doing these other ones. They'll be 15 to 20 minutes, and I will work hard to keep at that time frame so that you don't have to take too much time out to view the videos. So I'm happy that you're with me, and I look forward to seeing you again.